Today's story is called He Married Her Just for a Deal but Ended Up Falling in Love for Real. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain drummed softly against the glass wall of the downtown restaurant when Daniel Reid, 35, CEO of Reid Holdings, said the words that would change everything. "Marry me," he said calmly, his tone as steady as his gaze. "Think of it as a contract." Across the table, Claire Evans nearly dropped her coffee. "I beg your pardon?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of rain. Daniel leaned forward, hands clasped, every inch the calculating businessman he was known to be. "You need money for your mother's treatment," he said. "I need a fiancé for 1 month. The board meeting is in 4 weeks, and my grandmother's inheritance clause requires that I be married by then, or I lose control of the company." Claire blinked, stunned. She had met him only twice before, once at a charity gala where she worked as a florist, and once when she delivered an arrangement to his office. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined sitting across from him like this. "You cannot be serious," she murmured. Daniel's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "I am always serious. You will be compensated. $100,000. Enough to cover the surgery and your debts." He slid a folder across the table, its edges perfectly aligned. Inside was a contract already bearing his signature. Claire stared at it as her heart pounded against her ribs. She wanted to stand up, to walk out, but the image of her mother lying in a hospital bed anchored her to the chair. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Daniel's answer was simple. "Because you are the only person I can trust not to fall in love." For a long moment, only the sound of rain filled the silence between them. Claire looked up, her eyes meeting his. There was no warmth there, only precision, control, and something else, loneliness, perhaps, hidden behind the steel of his composure. "If I say yes," she said, "what are the rules?" Daniel's expression softened by a fraction. "3 rules," he replied. "No real feelings, no interference in my personal life, and no leaving before the board meeting." He paused, then added almost as an afterthought, "and do not look for anything beyond the contract." Claire inhaled slowly, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She was a florist, a woman who believed in real love, in small joys and honest days. He was a man who measured everything in numbers and deadlines. And yet, fate had placed them across the same table, in the same storm, with one impossible offer between them. Daniel extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Claire hesitated, her pulse roaring in her ears. She thought of her mother's smile, of the medical bills stacked like walls around her, and finally placed her trembling hand in his. "We have a deal," she said softly. Daniel nodded once, businesslike. "The wedding will be this weekend. My assistant will handle the details." He stood, adjusted his tie, and left without looking back, leaving her alone with the sound of the rain and a contract that would change her life. Claire sat frozen for a moment before whispering to herself, "What have I just agreed to?" Outside, the city lights blurred in the storm, and somewhere high above, the man who had just bought himself a bride was staring out of his penthouse window, unaware that the deal he thought was business would soon rewrite both of their hearts. The morning sun spilled through the blinds of a high-rise apartment overlooking the city. Claire stood by the window, her reflection faint against the skyline, wearing a pale ivory dress that Daniel's assistant had left for her. It was simple but elegant, the kind of dress that whispered money without shouting it. She barely recognized herself. 2 days had passed since she signed the contract. Everything had moved at an impossible speed. Yesterday she had been a florist with overdue rent and sleepless nights. Today she was the future Mrs. Daniel Reid. The thought made her chest tighten. Downstairs, a black car waited to take her to the Reid residence for the ceremony. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the necklace her mother had given her before the surgery. "You are doing the right thing," she whispered to her reflection. "Just 1 month. Then it will all be over." When she arrived, the mansion felt more like a museum than a home. The air was cool, still, scented faintly of polished wood and lilies. Daniel stood by the grand staircase in a tailored charcoal suit. He looked as if he had stepped straight out of a magazine, controlled, composed, unreachable. "You are on time," he said simply. His voice gave away nothing. Claire forced a polite smile. "You make punctuality sound like an achievement." He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching, almost a smile. "It is, in my world." They walked to the small garden at the back where a private officiant and 2 witnesses from his legal team waited. There were no flowers, no guests, no vows of love. Just a quiet exchange of words that sounded more like a merger agreement than a wedding. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Daniel hesitated, then brushed a brief, formal kiss against her cheek. Claire's heart ached at how transactional it felt. It was over in less than 10 minutes. "Congratulations, Mrs. Reid," the lawyer said. The words felt surreal. Daniel led her back into the house, his tone polite but distant. "You will have your own room down the east hallway. Appear with me at 2 events this week. My assistant will brief you on attire and etiquette. Keep your schedule clear." Claire nodded, feeling smaller with every instruction. When she finally reached her room, she closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. The space was beautiful, soft lighting, cream walls, a balcony overlooking the city, but it felt like a gilded cage. She opened her phone to check messages. There were none. For a moment, she wanted to call her mother, to hear her voice, but she stopped. This was supposed to be temporary. She could not afford to get attached to this life. Later that evening, she heard a soft knock. Daniel stood at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might prefer this to champagne," he said. Claire blinked in surprise. "Thank you," she said, taking the cup. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable but cautious. He studied her for a moment. "You look tired." "So do you," she replied gently. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something human flicker behind the calm. He cleared his throat. "Tomorrow, we will attend a dinner with the board. They will expect us to act married." She smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I should start practicing." He almost laughed but caught himself. "Get some rest, Claire." When he left, she looked around the room again. The walls seemed less intimidating now. She sipped the coffee, warm and rich, and allowed herself to breathe. Somewhere in the vast, silent house, Daniel sat in his study staring at the wedding ring on his hand. It was supposed to be a business arrangement, nothing more. But as he remembered the nervous kindness in her eyes, he realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, Daniel Reid felt the faint echo of doubt. And maybe, just maybe, the first spark of something real. The next morning, the Reid mansion came alive with quiet efficiency. Staff moved discreetly through the halls, polishing silver and arranging fresh flowers as if nothing monumental had happened the day before. Yet to Claire, everything felt unreal. She was now Mrs. Reid in name only, living inside a life that did not belong to her. The smell of coffee drifted down the hall as she stepped out of her room, dressed modestly in a cream blouse and tailored skirt that Daniel's assistant had chosen. In the dining room, Daniel sat behind a laptop, already immersed in emails. His tie was perfectly straight, his posture exact. He looked up briefly when she entered. "Good morning," he said. "Sleep well?" "As well as anyone who just got married to a stranger," she replied softly. His lips curved faintly. "At least you are honest." The housekeeper brought breakfast: fresh fruit, eggs, toast, and a carafe of orange juice. Claire sat across from him, feeling the distance stretch like invisible glass between them. He noticed her hesitation. You do not have to ask permission to eat, he said. This is your home for the next month. She nodded, unsure whether to laugh or cry. After breakfast, Daniel rose and adjusted his cufflinks. The car will pick you up at 6. The dinner is at the Imperial Hotel. It is a formal event, black tie. You will be seated beside me. Claire's heart raced. And what exactly am I supposed to say to your board of directors? As little as possible, he said dryly. Just smile. They only need to see that I am settled. He paused at the door, glancing back at her. Claire, this arrangement may seem cold, but it is necessary. Try not to take it personally. She gave a small nod. I will do my best, Mr. Reid. His expression flickered for a moment before he replied, Daniel. At least when others are listening. When evening came, the Imperial Hotel shimmered beneath golden lights. The ballroom was filled with crystal chandeliers and the low hum of conversation. Daniel looked every bit the powerful executive, his presence commanding and effortless. Claire, on his arm, wore a navy gown that hugged her figure with understated elegance. Heads turned as they entered. She felt eyes on her, whispers following her every step. Daniel leaned slightly toward her. Remember, they are not judging you. They are judging me. Comforting, she murmured. He smirked. Then let us give them a show. The dinner unfolded like a polished play. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, laughter floated through the air. Claire managed polite smiles, answering light questions about how they met. A mutual friend, she said simply, the rehearsed line flowing easily. Yet when Daniel spoke of her, something in his tone softened. She has a calm way of grounding chaos, he told one of the directors, his hand resting gently over hers. It was a small gesture, part of the act, but Claire's heart skipped anyway. As dessert arrived, one of the older board members leaned forward with a grin. You two seem genuine. I have not seen Daniel this relaxed in years. Daniel met Claire's eyes, a flicker of warmth there. Maybe I finally found my match. The words were casual, but they lingered between them long after the dinner ended. In the car ride home, silence filled the space. City lights slid across Daniel's face as he loosened his tie. You handled that well, he said quietly. Thank you. Claire smiled faintly. Was that an actual compliment? Do not get used to it. She laughed softly, and for the first time, he did too. The sound surprised them both. When they arrived back at the mansion, Daniel paused before heading to his study. You did perfectly tonight, he said, his tone almost gentle. Good night, Claire. She watched him disappear down the hallway, her heart uneasy. This was supposed to be pretend. But the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he said her name, it was beginning to feel dangerously real. As she closed her bedroom door, she whispered to herself, just 1 month. Keep your heart out of it. But deep down, she already knew that promise would be hard to keep. Days turned into a quiet rhythm inside the Reid mansion. Claire woke early each morning, wandering through rooms that still felt borrowed. She filled her hours arranging flowers from the garden, reading in the library, or sketching by the balcony while Daniel buried himself in conference calls and meetings. Their paths crossed only at breakfast or dinner, and even then, words were few. Yet beneath the politeness, something invisible began to shift. One afternoon, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. He found Claire in the sunroom, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by petals and ribbons as she crafted small bouquets for the staff. She looked up, startled. You are home early, she said. The meeting ended faster than I expected, he replied, watching her hands move gracefully as she tied another ribbon. You are still making flowers even here? She smiled shyly. It keeps me sane. Flowers do not talk back. Daniel chuckled softly, the sound rare but warm. Maybe that is why I like them too. For the first time, Claire saw the man behind the titleless CEO more human. He rolled up his sleeves and knelt beside her. "Teach me," he said suddenly. "I cannot promise talent, but I can follow instructions." She laughed. "All right, Mr. Reid, fold this ribbon exactly like this." He tried, his large hands awkward with the delicate silk. When the ribbon slipped, she reached out to guide his fingers. The touch lingered longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and the air grew still. Daniel looked away first, clearing his throat. "I am better at contracts than crafts." "I noticed," she teased gently. That small, unguarded smile stayed with her long after he left the room. Over the next few days, Daniel began to find reasons to cross paths with her. A question about a flower arrangement, a coffee shared in the garden, a comment about the weather that turned into an hour-long conversation. The walls between them thinned, replaced by quiet laughter and hesitant curiosity. One evening, as a storm rolled over the city, a power outage swept through the mansion. The hallways fell into darkness. Claire lit a candle and made her way toward the study. She found Daniel standing by the window, illuminated only by flashes of lightning. "Looks like even your empire bows to nature," she said softly. He turned, surprised, then smiled faintly. "I suppose it does. Sit with me?" She nodded, placing the candle on his desk. For a while, they listened to the rain. Then Daniel spoke, his voice lower than usual. "I used to love storms when I was a kid. They made me feel small in a good way. Reminded me that I could not control everything." Claire tilted her head. "You still try to." He let out a quiet laugh. "Old habits die hard." The flickering candlelight softened his face, revealing a kind of weariness she had never seen before. "Why do you work so much?" she asked. "Because when I stop, I have to think," he admitted. "And thinking leads to remembering." "Remembering what?" "The day my father died. The day I realized success was the only way to survive his legacy." His confession hung in the air, raw and unpolished. Claire's chest tightened. She reached out, touching his hand gently. "You do not have to survive it anymore, Daniel. You just have to live." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he turned his palm to hold hers, the gesture deliberate, real. "You make it sound simple." "Maybe it is," she whispered. The thunder rumbled, and neither of them moved. When the lights finally flickered back on, the moment dissolved, but its warmth lingered. Later that night, Daniel stood alone by the window, watching the rain. He caught his reflection, the wedding ring glinting faintly on his hand, and realized something had changed. The contract still existed on paper, but inside his chest, the lines between business and emotion had begun to blur. And for the first time in years, the thought of breaking his own rules did not scare him. It felt inevitable. The following week brought the charity gala, one of the most anticipated events in the city. For Daniel, it was another obligation to prove his company's stability in front of the press and investors. For Claire, it was her first time stepping fully into the public eye as Mrs. Reid. The mansion buzzed with preparations all day. Stylists, assistants, and designers moved in and out, ensuring every detail of her appearance was flawless. When Claire finally looked into the mirror, even she did not recognize herself. The dark emerald gown shimmered softly under the lights, her hair swept elegantly to one side. Yet behind the glamour, her heart thudded in quiet panic. This was not her world. Downstairs, Daniel waited in a black tuxedo. When she appeared at the top of the stairs, his breath caught for the briefest second. He quickly masked it with his usual composure, but his voice betrayed him slightly when he said, "You look perfect." She smiled nervously. "I hope I can survive the evening without embarrassing you." "You will not," he said. "Stay close to me, answer only what you are comfortable with, and remember this is just another performance." "Right," she whispered, though part of her wished it was not. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Langford Hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as hundreds of guests mingled beneath. Cameras flashed the moment Daniel and Claire arrived. He placed a reassuring hand on her back, guiding her through the crowd. "Smile," he murmured. "They can smell fear." She laughed softly, and the sound drew a few glances. They were a striking pair, his calm authority matched by her quiet grace. As the evening unfolded, reporters hovered nearby, eager to capture the perfect photo of the elusive CEO and his mysterious wife. When asked how they met, Daniel answered smoothly, "By accident, but perhaps it was the best mistake of my life." The words were effortless, but Claire's heart skipped. For a moment, she forgot it was all for show. Then, during the dinner, a woman approached their tablet, all polished and clearly familiar with Daniel. "Daniel, it has been too long," she said warmly. "And this must be the new Mrs. Reid." Her tone carried an edge wrapped in charm. "Sophie," Daniel greeted evenly. "It is good to see you." Claire extended a polite hand. "Nice to meet you." Sophie smiled thinly. "I must say, you are not what I expected." Daniel always had a taste for sophistication. The insult was disguised as flattery. Daniel's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Claire leaned forward with a gentle smile. "Sophistication is overrated. Sometimes all it takes is kindness and honesty to keep a man's attention." The nearby guests chuckled. Sophie's smile faltered. Daniel hid his amusement behind a sip of champagne. "Touché," he murmured under his breath. As the evening continued, Claire handled every conversation with poise, earning approving nods from the board members and even the press. Daniel watched her, quietly astonished. She had stepped into his world with courage and grace, and for the first time, he found himself wanting to protect her not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. When the speeches began, Daniel was called to the stage. He delivered his address with his usual eloquence, but midway through, he glanced at Claire seated below. For a heartbeat, his mask slipped, and his voice softened. "Success means nothing without purpose," he said. "And sometimes, purpose finds you when you least expect it." The audience applauded, unaware that his words were directed at her. Later, as the night ended, Claire stood on the balcony to breathe, her hands resting on the railing as city lights sparkled below. Daniel joined her, the sound of laughter fading behind them. "You handled yourself brilliantly," he said quietly. She turned, smiling. "I learned from the best." He stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing. "You make this charade almost believable." "Almost?" she asked. His gaze lingered on her lips. "Maybe too believable." The silence stretched, charged and fragile. For a moment, it felt like the world around them disappeared, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of the city. But before either could speak, a photographer's flash went off from behind the glass doors. The moment shattered. Daniel exhaled sharply, stepping back. "We should go." Claire nodded, masking the ache that rose in her chest. The night had been a performance, yet her heart refused to treat it as one. As they left the balcony, she realized with a quiet dread that somewhere between the act and the reality, she had already fallen in love. The morning after the gala, the mansion felt quieter than usual. Claire woke late, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the events of the night still spinning in her mind. The way Daniel had looked at her during his speech, the warmth in his voice, the closeness on the balcony before that flash interrupted them, everything replayed over and over like a scene she could not escape. Downstairs, she found Daniel already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pouring coffee. It was unusual to see him without a tie or a perfectly pressed suit. "Good morning," he said, glancing up. "Sleep well?" Eventually, she replied, smiling faintly. "You?" "Barely. Reporters have been sending requests for interviews since sunrise. Apparently, we were the highlight of the night." Claire flushed slightly. "I hope that is a good thing." "It is," he said, handing her a cup. "You handled everything perfectly." She took the coffee, feeling their fingers brush for a second too long. The silence that followed was not awkward, just charged. Daniel, she began carefully, about last night, that moment on the balcony. He cut her off gently. We do not need to explain it. It was part of the act. His tone was calm, but his eyes flickered with something unspoken. Claire nodded slowly, pretending that the answer did not sting. Of course. Just the act. She smiled, though it felt forced, and turned away to hide her disappointment. The next few days passed with strange tension between them. They kept their distance during the day, but the air seemed heavier whenever they crossed paths. Then, one evening, as Claire was arranging flowers in the foyer, Daniel's mother unexpectedly arrived. Eleanor Reid was tall, elegant, and sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it. So, she said, her voice cool, you are the one he married. Claire straightened quickly, offering a polite smile. Mrs. Reid, it is lovely to meet you. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. A florist, I hear. Interesting choice for a Reid. Before Claire could respond, Daniel entered. Mother, that is enough. I am only curious, darling, Eleanor replied, unbothered. Your father would have wanted you to marry someone with social standing. My father is gone, Daniel said flatly. And this conversation is over. He guided Claire toward the living room, his hand firm but protective. When they were alone, he exhaled sharply. I am sorry. She has never been good at kindness. Claire shook her head. It is all right, I am used to people judging me. You should not have to be, he said quietly. For a moment, they stood close, the tension melting into something tender. But before either could speak, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. It is work, he muttered. I have to take this. He left quickly, his voice sharp as he stepped into his office. Claire lingered by the doorway, hearing fragments of his conversation. No, the merger cannot leak. If the board finds out, we lose everything. His tone grew colder. Do whatever it takes to keep it quiet. When he hung up, he found her watching him. Trouble? She asked softly. Nothing I cannot handle, he said, but his expression told another story. That night, Claire could not sleep. She walked into the garden, the air cool and sweet with the scent of lilies. She was lost in thought when she heard footsteps behind her. Daniel stood there, hands in his pockets, the glow from the lantern soft against his face. I did not mean to scare you, he said. Could not sleep either? Too much noise in my head, she admitted. Mine too, he said quietly. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the distance between them closing with every breath. Claire, he began, his voice low, I have spent my whole life making decisions with my head. But lately, every time I look at you, it feels like my heart is trying to argue back. Her breath caught. Daniel, he took a step closer, then stopped, his expression conflicted. This was supposed to be a contract. Simple. Controlled. But nothing about you feels simple. She looked at him, her eyes shining under the garden lights. Maybe love is not supposed to be. His name on her lips broke his restraint. Slowly, he reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. If I kiss you now, he whispered, it stops being pretend. Then do not pretend, she said softly. The world seemed to fall away as he leaned in. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then certain an unspoken confession sealed under the night sky. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel's voice was barely a breath. I think I just broke every rule in that contract. Claire smiled, her hand resting on his chest. Then maybe it is time to write new ones. For the next few days, everything between Daniel and Claire felt different. The air in the mansion carried an invisible spark, a quiet awareness of the kiss that had changed everything. They tried to act as if nothing had happened, but each glance, each shared silence, betrayed the truth. Daniel had stopped hiding behind his calm exterior. He found excuses to see her, to ask about her day, to linger just a little longer whenever she was near. Claire, in turn, felt her guard crumble. She had fallen for him completely, and despite the fear that came with it, she could not bring herself to regret a single moment. But peace rarely lasts. On a gray Thursday morning, while Claire was arranging flowers in the hallway, she overheard raised voices coming from Daniel's study. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, she saw a man in a dark suit. Mr. Graves, Daniel's longtime business rival and a member of the board. "You think you can hide forever?" Graves snapped. "The press already has the documents. Once they see the clause in your father's will, they will know this marriage is a sham." Daniel's voice was sharp. "You have no proof." Graves smirked. "Not yet. But when I do, the board will force you to resign. And your little wife will learn what she married into." Claire froze, her blood running cold. She stepped back, her pulse pounding. A sham. The words echoed in her head. All this time, she had known it began as a contract, but now it felt like her entire world was being reduced back to the tan arrangement, a lie. When Graves left, Daniel found her standing in the corridor, pale and silent. "Claire," he began, but she stepped away. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long before they find out that our marriage is nothing more than a business strategy?" Daniel's face tightened. "It is not like that anymore." "But it was," she whispered. "Was any of it real?" "You know it was," he said, his voice firm but pleading. "Everything changed the moment I met you." She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "You promised honesty, Daniel. You should have told me the truth before someone else did." "I was trying to protect you," he said. "From what?" she cried. "From the truth or from yourself?" The silence between them was heavy and sharp. Claire took off the simple gold ring he had given her, holding it for a moment before setting it on the table. "I cannot do this," she said softly. "I will not be part of a lie." Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Claire, please." "Goodbye, Daniel." Her voice trembled, but her steps did not falter as she walked out of the room. Daniel stood frozen, the sound of the door closing echoing through the hall like a verdict. The woman who had taught him how to feel again was gone, and for the first time, the man who had built his life on control felt completely powerless. Days turned into weeks after Claire left the mansion. The rooms that once echoed with quiet laughter now felt hollow, haunted by absence. Daniel buried himself in work, attending meetings and signing contracts with the same precision as before, but his focus was gone. Every document he read blurred into the memory of her face, the way she had looked at him before walking away. For the first time in years, success meant nothing. His assistant tried to speak with him about the board's pressure, about Graves spreading rumors to the press, but Daniel could not care. The truth had caught up with him. He had built his empire on control, yet one woman's departure had left him undone. Meanwhile, Claire had returned to her old apartment above the small flower shop where she once worked. Life resumed its slow rhythm, orders to fill, customers to greet, but her heart was elsewhere. Every time she tied a ribbon or touched a petal, she remembered Daniel kneeling beside her, trying to learn the same craft with clumsy hands. She told herself it was better this way, that leaving him was the right choice, yet at night, she caught herself staring at the empty side of the bed, whispering his name into the dark. Then, one morning, while arranging white roses for a hospital delivery, she noticed a small envelope tucked beneath the bouquet. Her name was written on it in his handwriting. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single note: "The truth is no longer a secret. Come to the Langford Hotel at 6. I owe you and everyone else the truth." Her heart pounded as she stared at the words. That evening, the Langford Hotel was filled with reporters and investors for the annual corporate conference. Claire slipped in quietly, blending with the crowd. On stage, Daniel stood behind the podium, every camera trained on him. But instead of his usual composure, his eyes searched the audience until they found her. When he began speaking, his voice carried not authority but honesty. "Some of you have heard rumors about my marriage," he said. and I will not deny them. It began as a contractor requirement in my father's will. But what started as business became the only truth that matters to me. I fell in love with the woman I least expected, the one who reminded me that integrity and compassion mean more than legacy or power. The room fell silent. He continued, his voice steady. To my shareholders, I am offering full transparency. The inheritance clause no longer binds this company. I am transferring control of the charitable division to an independent trust, the Claire Foundation, for those who build rather than inherit. The crowd erupted in murmurs, cameras flashing. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Daniel looked directly at her. I do not expect forgiveness, he said quietly, his words carrying across the hall. But I hope she knows that for the first time, I am not hiding behind contracts. This is me choosing truth. When he stepped off the stage, reporters swarmed him, but he pushed through, heading straight toward her. Claire stood frozen as he reached her. You did not have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I did, he replied. Because you were right. I did not need to protect you from the truth. I needed to face it with you. She searched his eyes for a lie and found none. So what now? She asked. Now, he said softly, it is your choice. I made mine. The hall around them buzzed with noise, but for a brief moment, it felt like the world had gone still, waiting for her answer. The weeks that followed Daniel's public confession felt like the slow turning of a new season. The scandal that Graves had tried to ignite faded quickly, replaced by admiration for Daniel's honesty and the bold creation of the Claire Foundation. Investors respected him even more for taking responsibility, but the man himself cared only about one thing: whether Claire would forgive him. She had not spoken to him since that night. She had simply walked away from the hotel, her heart torn between relief and confusion. For the first time in her life, she did not know how to move forward. But fate, as always, had its own timing. One quiet afternoon, Claire returned to the flower shop after making deliveries. On the counter sat a large wooden box tied with a silver ribbon, no name, no card, just her initials carved neatly on top. She untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside was a single gold key resting on a velvet cushion, and beneath it, a folded note written in Daniel's careful handwriting. It read, every contract deserves an ending. But this time, I would rather start something real. If you are ready, the key will take you to where it all began. Her heart raced as she held the key. The address engraved on the small metal tag led her to the mansion. When she arrived, the house no longer looked like the cold museum she remembered. The doors were open, and soft music played from inside. Daniel stood in the foyer, dressed simply, no suit, no armor of professionalism, just a man waiting. You found the key, he said, his voice quiet but warm. I was not sure you would come. Claire smiled faintly. Curiosity has always been my weakness. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Then let me give you another reason to stay curious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old wedding contract, the same one that had once defined them. Slowly, he tore it in half. This is the last deal I ever want to end, he said. Because from now on, I do not want a contract. I want a choice. He knelt before her, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple ring, elegant and unassuming, nothing like the one from their fake wedding. Claire Evans, he said softly, his voice unsteady with emotion, will you marry me for real this time? Not for legacy, not for business, but because I cannot imagine my life without you? Tears filled her eyes as she looked down at him. For a moment, all the pain, the lies, and the heartbreak melted into one truth: the love they had both tried to deny had survived everything. She nodded, whispering, yes, Daniel. This time, no contracts, no conditions, just us. Relief and joy broke across his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The moment felt quiet, pure, and whole. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her as if afraid she might disappear. Welcome home, he murmured. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, the two of them stood on the mansion's balcony, the city lights shimmering below. The garden where they once shared their first kiss was in full bloom again. Claire rested her head against his shoulder and said softly, "Funny how something that started as a lie became the most honest thing I have ever known." Daniel smiled. "Because truth only matters when you choose it together." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Then let us keep choosing it every day." He kissed her forehead, and as the last light faded into the horizon, their story once written in ink and obligation was rewritten in love and freedom. And for the first time, Daniel Reid and Claire Evans finally began their forever.